I'm Ashley Collins, 28, a forensic accountant specializing in estate fraud investigations. The smell of old leather and my father's cologne still clung to his office chair, even 3 months after the funeral. I pressed my face against the worn armrest, breathing in what was left of him, when Uncle Richard's laughter echoed from the hallway below. That laugh, sharp and triumphant, like broken glass scraping against concrete. It was the same sound he'd made when the lawyer read Dad's will, or what Richard claimed was Dad's will. The same laugh that followed his announcement that the entire Collins family estate, worth over $2 million, now belonged to him. Every acre of farmland, every investment account, even this house where my sister Emma and I had grown up. Ashley, you need to see this. Emma's voice cracked from the doorway. At 25, she still looked like the scared little girl who used to hide behind Dad's legs during thunderstorms. Now she was hiding from our own family. I turned from the chair, wiping my eyes before she could see the tears. What is it? She held up a manila envelope, her hands trembling. I found it wedged behind Dad's filing cabinet when I was packing his things. It's addressed to both of us. The envelope felt heavier than it should have as I took it from her. Dad's handwriting sprawled across the front in his familiar blue ink. For my girls, in case something happens to me. The postmark was dated just 2 weeks before his heart attack. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. My fingers traced the sealed edge. Dad had been acting strange those last few weeks, staying up late in his office, making hush phone calls that stopped whenever Emma or I walked into the room. I'd assumed it was work stress from the construction company he'd built from nothing. Now, staring at this envelope that somehow survived Richard's thorough cleaning of the house, I wondered if Dad had known something was coming. Should we open it? Emma whispered, as if speaking too loudly might summon Richard back upstairs. The sound of his voice drifted up from the kitchen, smooth and confident as he spoke to someone on the phone. No, the girls won't be a problem. They're too grief-stricken to think straight. Besides, what are they going to do? The will is ironclad. My jaw clenched. Grief-stricken. As if our pain was just another tool for him to exploit. I tore open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small silver key I'd never seen before. Dad's handwriting filled the page, but these words were different. Urgent. Almost frantic. Ashley and Emma, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and Richard has probably already made his move. I've suspected for months that he's been forging documents and manipulating my business accounts. I hired a private investigator, but I need more time to gather evidence. The key opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank, box 247. Inside you'll find copies of the Real will, financial records, and recordings that prove what Richard has been doing. I've also included evidence of his gambling debts and the money he's stolen from the company over the past 2 years. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you girls from this, but I've made sure you have everything you need to fight back. All my love, Dad. The paper slipped from my numb fingers and fluttered to the floor. Emma bent to pick it up, her eyes scanning the words as her face went pale. He knew, she breathed. Dad knew what Richard was planning. Footsteps creaked on the stairs. Heavy, deliberate steps that I recognized immediately. Richard was coming up. I grabbed the key and shoved it deep into my pocket just as a shadow filled the doorway. At 52, my uncle still carried himself like the high school football star he'd once been, but years of drinking and gambling had softened his edges and hardened his eyes. Girls, he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. I hope you're not making this harder than it needs to be. The moving truck will be here tomorrow morning. This is our home, Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Was your home? According to your father's will, everything belongs to me now. I've been generous enough to give you a week to pack your things. I studied his face, looking for any crack in his confidence. But he stood there like a man who'd already won, like someone who'd never considered the possibility that his victims might fight back. Of course, I said quietly. We understand. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, that I wasn't arguing. Good. Let him think we were broken. He nodded and turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. Oh, and Ashley? I know you've been going through your father's papers. I hope you're not looking for something that isn't there. James was always sentimental, but he was also practical. He knew I was the only one capable of handling the family business. The casual cruelty in his voice made my stomach turn. But I kept my expression neutral, my hand steady. We're just packing memories, Uncle Richard. Nothing more. After his footsteps faded down the hallway, Emma grabbed my arm. Ashley, what are we going to do? I pulled the key from my pocket, feeling its weight against my palm. 3 months ago, I'd been a grieving daughter with no legal training and no money for lawyers. But I was also a forensic accountant who specialized in following paper trails and uncovering financial fraud. Richard had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated exactly who he was stealing from. We're going to the bank, I said. And then we're going to destroy him. Emma's eyes widened. But what if he finds out? What if? A door slammed somewhere in the house, followed by the sound of Richard's car starting in the driveway. Through Dad's office window, I watched him pull away, probably heading to the bar where he spent most evenings celebrating his good fortune. I was about to answer Emma when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Sitting on Dad's desk, exactly where I'd left it that morning, was my laptop. The screen was dark, but the power light was still blinking. Someone had been using it while we were downstairs. The safety deposit box felt like opening a tomb. Emma's breathing echoed in the small viewing room at First National Bank as I turned Dad's key, my hands steadier than they'd been in months. The metallic click of the lock disengaging sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Inside, manila folders were stacked with military precision, Dad's engineering background showing even in his final preparations. But it was the small digital recorder sitting on top that made my heart race. A yellow sticky note was attached. Play me first. I pressed play, and Dad's voice filled the room, tired but determined. Richard, I know you're listening to my calls. I know you've been in my office, going through my files. But you made one mistake. You forgot I taught you everything you know about this business, which means I know exactly how you think. Emma grabbed my hand as Dad's voice continued. I've been recording our conversations for 6 weeks now. Every time you've pressured me to change my will. Every time you've mentioned my failing health and how the girls couldn't handle the responsibility. I have it all, Richard, including your confession about the forged contracts with Morrison Construction. My breath caught. Morrison Construction was our biggest client, a contract worth over $500,000 annually. The real will is in this box, witnessed and notarized properly. Ashley gets the house and 60% of the business. Emma gets 40% and the investment accounts. You get nothing, just like you deserve. The recording crackled with static before Dad's voice returned, softer now. I also have evidence of your gambling debts to Tony Marcelli. $1,200,000, Richard. I know because Tony came to me asking if I'd cover them. I said no, but I started watching our accounts more carefully after that. The missing money from the pension fund, the inflated supply costs, the phantom employees on payroll. I found it all. Emma was crying now, quiet tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand. I felt numb, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. If something happens to me, girls, know that I tried to protect you. And Richard, if you're somehow hearing this, know that I never stopped loving you, even after I discovered what you'd become. The recording ended with a soft click. I opened the first folder with trembling fingers. Bank statements, photocopied checks, email printouts, a paper trail that painted a picture of systematic theft spanning 2 years. Richard had been skimming money from every account he could access, always small amounts that wouldn't trigger immediate attention. But together, they added up to over $300,000. Ashley, Emma whispered, pointing to a photograph tucked between 2 bank statements. Look at this. It was a picture of Richard shaking hands with a man I didn't recognize outside a casino. The timestamp showed it was taken just 3 days before Dad's heart attack. On the back, someone had written, "R. Collins meeting with T. Marcelli, final payment discussion." Tony Marcelli, I breathed. Dad mentioned him in the recording. Emma pulled out her phone and started typing. After a few minutes, her face went pale. Ashley, Tony Marcelli isn't just some loan shark. He's connected to the Torino crime family. There are news articles about him going back years. Money laundering, extortion, assault charges that never stuck. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed made my stomach turn. Richard hadn't just stolen from us. He'd gotten involved with dangerous people and used our family's business as collateral. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. Stop digging or your sister gets hurt. Some secrets should stay buried. Emma saw my face change. What is it? I showed her the message, watching the color drain from her cheeks. We need to leave. Now. But as we gathered the documents, footsteps echoed in the bank's main lobby. Heavy, deliberate steps that I recognized immediately. Through the viewing room's small window, I saw Richard talking to the bank manager, his voice too low to hear but his gestures increasingly agitated. He followed us, Emma whispered. I stuffed the most important documents into my purse and grabbed the digital recorder. There's a back exit through the employee area. I saw it when we came in. We slipped out of the viewing room, but Richard's voice carried down the hallway. I'm telling you, those girls are emotionally unstable. They're probably trying to contest their father's will with forged documents. As the estate's executor, I have every right to monitor their activities. The bank manager's response was muffled, but I caught enough to know he was wavering. Richard had always been persuasive. It's how he'd talked his way into Dad's business in the first place. We made it to the employee exit, but as I pushed open the door, my phone rang. Richard's name flashed on the screen. Against every instinct, I answered. Ashley, sweetheart, where are you? I stopped by the house and you weren't there. I was worried. His voice was warm, concerned, the same tone he'd used when I was 8 and had fallen off my bike. For a moment, I almost believed he cared. We're running errands, I said carefully. Of course. Listen, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about keeping some of your father's personal items. Maybe we can work something out. Why don't you come home and we'll talk? Through the phone, I could hear the bank's lobby sounds in the background. He was still inside, which meant he didn't know we'd left through the back. That sounds nice, Uncle Richard. We'll be home soon. I hung up and turned to Emma. He's buying us time, but not much. We need somewhere safe to go through these documents. What about Sarah's place? Emma suggested. Sarah Chun had been my roommate in college and now worked as a paralegal downtown. More importantly, she lived in a secure apartment building that Richard had never been to. As we hurried toward my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The parking lot felt too quiet, too empty for a Tuesday afternoon. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. I was unlocking the car when Emma grabbed my arm. Ashley, look. Across the street, a black sedan sat idling with tinted windows. As soon as Emma pointed it out, the engine started and the car pulled away, but not before I caught a glimpse of the license plate. It started with TMC, the same initials as Tony Marcelli Construction, a company I'd seen mentioned in Dad's files. They're watching us, Emma said, her voice barely audible. I started the engine, my mind racing. Richard wasn't just stealing from us, he was working with people who made threats and followed through on them. People who wouldn't hesitate to hurt 2 grieving daughters if it meant protecting their investment. But as we drove toward Sarah's apartment, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Dad's funeral. Hope. Because Richard had made another crucial mistake. He'd assumed that fear would make us back down. He was about to learn that Colin's women don't scare easily. We were halfway to Sarah's when my phone buzzed with another text. This time it was a photo. Emma and me, taken through the bank's window just minutes ago. Below it, a single line of text. Last warning. I showed Emma the message, watching her face crumble. Maybe we should just let him have it, she whispered. Maybe it's not worth the risk. I pulled over and turned to face her. Emma, look at me. Dad didn't hide this evidence so we could give up at the first threat. He knew exactly what kind of people Richard was involved with, and he still fought back. But what if they hurt us? What if? Then we make sure they go down with Richard. I held up the digital recorder. This isn't just about money anymore. It's about justice. And Dad made sure we have everything we need to get it. Emma nodded slowly, but I could see the fear still lingering in her eyes. I didn't blame her. I was terrified too. But I was also angry, and anger was a much more useful emotion than fear. As we pulled back into traffic, I noticed the black sedan had returned, following us at a careful distance. Let them watch, I thought. Let them think they had us scared. Because tomorrow, I was taking everything we'd found to the police. And then I was going to watch Richard's world burn. But first, we had to survive the night. The sedan was still behind us when we turned onto Sarah Street, and as I parked in the building's underground garage, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Richard's car was already there, parked in a visitor's spot near the elevator. He was waiting for us. The underground garage felt like a trap. Richard's silver BMW sat under the fluorescent lights like a predator waiting to strike, and I could see his silhouette in the driver's seat, phone pressed to his ear. He hadn't noticed us yet. We'd parked behind a concrete pillar that blocked his view. How did he know we'd come here? Emma whispered, her voice shaking. I thought about my laptop, the blinking power light, the way Richard had seemed so confident about our movements. He's been tracking us somehow. Phone, car, something. Emma pulled out her phone and started to dial 911, but I stopped her. Wait. If we call the police now, it's just our word against his. He'll claim he was visiting a friend in the building, and we'll look paranoid. Then what do? I studied Richard's position, calculating angles and distances. The elevator was 20 feet from his car, but there was a stairwell on the opposite side of the garage. If we could reach it without being seen, we go up the back stairs to Sarah's floor. Once we're inside her apartment, we call the police and show them everything. We slipped out of my car, staying low behind the parked vehicles. The garage was eerily quiet except for the hum of ventilation fans and the distant sound of Richard's voice echoing off the concrete walls. No, she doesn't suspect anything yet. But if she keeps digging... His words faded as we moved further away. The stairwell door was heavy and old, and it creaked when I pulled it open. The sound seemed to echo through the entire garage. I froze, listening for any change in Richard's conversation, but his voice continued uninterrupted. We climbed 6 flights in silence, our footsteps muffled by the rubber treads on the metal stairs. By the time we reached Sarah's floor, my heart was pounding for more than just the physical exertion. Sarah answered her door on the first knock, her expression shifting from surprise to concern as she saw our faces. Ashley? Emma? What's wrong? We need help, I said, glancing back toward the elevator. And we need to call the police. Sarah's apartment was small but comfortable, with law books scattered across every surface and the smell of coffee lingering in the air. She listened without interruption as I explained everything: Dad's death, Richard's theft, the safety deposit box, the threats. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone. I'm calling Detective Morrison. She handles white-collar crime, and she's good. Really good. While Sarah made the call, I spread Dad's documents across her coffee table. Bank statements, forged contracts, photographs. The evidence was overwhelming. But I kept thinking about Richard's confidence, his certainty that he'd already won. Detective Morrison will be here in 20 minutes, Sarah said, hanging up. She wants you to stay put until she arrives. Emma was standing by the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. Ashley, you need to see this. I joined her at the window. Richard's BMW was now parked across the street, and he was leaning against it, smoking a cigarette. But he wasn't alone. 2 men in dark suits stood nearby, and even from 6 floors up, I could see they weren't the kind of people you'd want to meet in a dark alley. Tony Marcelli's people, I breathed. Sarah looked over our shoulders and swore softly. We need to call Detective Morrison back. Tell her to bring backup. But before she could reach for her phone, someone knocked on the door. 3 sharp raps, followed by a pause, then 3 more. We all froze. Sarah lived alone, and she wasn't expecting anyone except the detective. Sarah Chen. The voice was muffled but polite. Building maintenance. We've had reports of a gas leak on this floor. Sarah shook her head. I didn't call maintenance. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Ma'am, this is a safety issue. We need to check all the apartments. I grabbed Sarah's arm. Is there another way out? Fire escape, she whispered, pointing toward her bedroom. But it only goes down to the alley. The knocking stopped, replaced by the sound of metal scraping against metal. Someone was picking the lock. We ran for the bedroom, but I stopped at the coffee table to grab Dad's documents. I couldn't leave them behind. They were the only proof we had. The fire escape was a narrow metal platform that swayed slightly under our weight. 6 floors down seemed like a very long way, and the alley below was dark and empty. But it was better than facing whoever was breaking into Sarah's apartment. We climbed down as quickly as we dared, the metal rungs cold and slippery under our hands. Behind us, I could hear voices in Sarah's apartment. At least 2 men, maybe more. They're searching the place, Sarah whispered. We were 3 floors down when my phone rang. The sound was impossibly loud in the quiet alley, and I fumbled to silence it. But not before I saw the caller ID, Detective Morrison. I answered on the second ring, keeping my voice low. Detective? Miss Collins? I'm in the lobby of your friend's building, but the doorman says there are men upstairs claiming to be police. They're asking about you. They're not police, I said. We're on the fire escape. Can you meet us in the alley? On my way. We reached the ground just as Detective Morrison appeared at the mouth of the alley. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with short gray hair and sharp eyes that took in our situation immediately. Are you hurt? She asked. No, but they're in Sarah's apartment. They were trying to get to us. Detective Morrison spoke into her radio, calling for backup and describing the situation. Then she turned back to us. I need to see what you found in that safety deposit box. I handed her the folder with Dad's documents and the digital recorder. She examined everything quickly but thoroughly, her expression growing darker with each piece of evidence. This is enough for multiple felony charges, she said finally. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. But we need to move fast. If your uncle realizes you have this evidence. She didn't need to finish the sentence. We all knew what Richard was capable of. There's something else, I said. I think he's been tracking us somehow. He knew we went to the bank, and he knew we'd come here. Detective Morrison frowned. Your phone, maybe. Or my car. Or... I stopped, remembering something. My laptop. Someone used it while we were out of the house yesterday. Spyware, Sarah said immediately. If he had access to your laptop, he could have installed tracking software, keyloggers, remote access tools. Detective Morrison's radio crackled with updates from the officers who'd arrived at Sarah's building. The men in her apartment had fled when they heard sirens, but they'd left behind evidence of their search. Overturned furniture, scattered papers, clear signs of forced entry. We're going to arrest your uncle tonight, Detective Morrison said. But I need you both somewhere safe until this is over. These people don't make idle threats. What about the trial? I asked. Will this evidence be enough to convict him? Detective Morrison smiled for the first time since we'd met. Miss Collins, your father built an airtight case. Between the financial records, the recordings, and the witness testimony we'll gather, your uncle is going to prison for a very long time. 3 hours later, we sat in a safe house across town, watching the news coverage of Richard's arrest. The reporter stood outside our family home, the house that was legally ours again, describing charges of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. But it was the footage of Richard being led away in handcuffs that made me feel something I hadn't experienced since Dad's funeral. Peace. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The confident man who'd laughed as he stole our inheritance was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood that actions have consequences. Emma was crying again, but these were different tears. Relief, maybe. Or justice. Dad would be proud, she said softly. I thought about the last conversation I'd had with him, just days before his heart attack. He'd seemed tired, worried about something he wouldn't discuss. Now I knew he'd been carrying the weight of Richard's betrayal, trying to protect us even as his own brother plotted against him. He was protecting us even after he was gone, I said. 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse as the judge read Richard's sentence. 15 years in federal prison, full restitution of stolen funds, and forfeiture of any claim to the Collins family estate. Richard's lawyer had tried to argue for leniency, claiming his client was a victim of gambling addiction and poor judgment. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the judge wasn't sympathetic to someone who'd stolen from his own family. As the bailiff led Richard away, he looked back at Emma and me one last time. I expected to see anger or defiance, but instead, I saw something that looked almost like regret. Maybe, in the end, he remembered who he used to be before greed and desperation consumed him. Tony Marcelli and his associates were arrested 2 weeks after Richard, charged with racketeering and extortion. The investigation into their activities led to the discovery of a money laundering operation that had been running for years, using legitimate businesses like Dad's construction company as fronts. Emma and I rebuilt Collins Construction from the ground up, implementing new safeguards and oversight procedures that would prevent anyone from stealing from us again. The business thrived, and within a year, we'd not only recovered the money Richard had stolen but expanded into new markets. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was standing in Dad's old office, now mine, and knowing that we'd honored his memory by fighting for what was right. The leather chair still smelled faintly of his cologne, and sometimes, when I was working late, I could almost feel his presence in the room. Proud, protective, and finally at peace. Richard had thought he could steal our future, but he'd underestimated the Collins family legacy. We weren't just inheriting money or property. We were inheriting Dad's values, his integrity, and his refusal to let bullies win. And that was something no one could ever take away from us. The rain started falling as I locked up the office that night, the same gentle spring rain that had been falling the day Dad died. But instead of feeling sad, I felt grateful. Grateful for a father who'd loved us enough to protect us even from beyond the grave. Grateful for evidence that spoke louder than lies. And grateful for the chance to prove that sometimes justice isn't just an ideal, it's a promise that good people keep to each other, no matter the cost. As I walked to my car, I thought about calling Emma to tell her about the new contract we'd just signed, the biggest in the company's history. But first, I had a stop to make. Dad's grave was quiet in the evening rain, the headstone simple and dignified, just like he'd been in life. I placed fresh flowers by the marker and sat on the small bench nearby. "We did it, Dad," I said softly. "We got him." The rain continued to fall, washing the world clean, and for the first time since his funeral, I felt like everything was going to be okay. Justice had been served. The family legacy was secure. And somewhere, I hoped Dad was smiling.